everyone. Thank you so much to DynamicsCon and to all of our voters for voting on my session today. My name's Natalie Jackson, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about CRM and marketing automation for DynamicsCon. So today we want to talk about the 7 marketing campaigns that maximize your CRM and marketing platform integration. I am the marketing director and resident marketing automation geek for Influence. We are 1 part digital marketing agency and 1 part marketing automation platform. So today we want to talk about the 7 marketing campaigns that maximize your CRM and marketing platform integration. I am the marketing director and resident marketing automation geek for Influence. We are 1 part digital marketing agency and 1 part marketing automation platform. And I've spent about 8 years working in Microsoft Dynamics myself. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to me. So really what we're going to ask ourselves today is how can we really get the most value out of our CRM and marketing platform integration? So to get us started, let's talk a little bit about the agenda. So here's where we'll get going. We have our prep work. Really what we're going to do is lay a foundation for a successful CRM strategy before we get into the campaign building. And then once we lay that foundation, we're going to talk about the 7 campaigns that we've identified here at Influence as being some of the most productive, some of the top performing, and some of the ones with the most value when you do connect your CRM and your marketing platform. So let's start with the prep work. I always like to say that without a plan, the data you're collecting in your CRM system and in your marketing automation platform is pretty much meaningless. So when you really start to think about prep work, what we're talking about here is how can we lay a foundation for making our data most successful so that we can use it as marketers. One of the things that in my experience I've discovered is that sales teams tend to get really frustrated with the marketing department because we're asking for an exorbitant amount of data every time they enter a record on a CRM system or even just make an outbound phone call. For the marketing department, however, we're often frustrated because we're finding that we're not getting enough data from the sales team to truly segment and make targeted campaigns that we know would be the more effective way for us to target our audience. So we have a disconnect where our CRM system really can help us be better aligned with our sales and marketing team. And that starts with the data. So when you're thinking about plans and how you might build those out in Dynamics so that you can be a more successful targeted marketer, I like to start with the end in mind. So what is it that you want to achieve as a marketer? If you're a B2C marketer, maybe that's you want to get rid of excess stock. So you might have a flash sale. You need to offload some of your summer stock. If you're on a B2B side, maybe you've got regional promotions or regional sales goals that you want to hit. Or maybe you want to hit target campaign renewals, contract renewals, or make sure that some of your existing customers are renewing in a timely fashion. So in order to run those kinds of campaigns and to make those campaigns automated, we'll have to know what data points we need in CRM. For the summer sale, maybe we need to know our customers' favorite styles or our favorite sizes so that we can send them targeted messaging so that they know exactly what we have left in their size and in their preferences. If it's something that's more regional, then we need to look at having zip codes, territories, regions. Good news for us is that those are things that CRM is set up specifically to do. And if it's contract end-date campaigns or renewal campaigns, or maybe if we've lost clients or opportunities to other competitors, what we need to do is have a date field somewhere in Dynamics that'll allow us to run some calculations. So next, you got to think about the hardest part of all, which is how are you going to get that data into your CRM system in the first place? So now that you know what data points you need, who will be responsible for inputting those data points? When you're talking about flash sales, summer stock, this is the kind of thing where you probably want your clients to give their preferences willingly. In that case, you want to look at your marketing automation platform and potentially have forms or fields or landing pages where your customers can tell you what their preferences are or look at some of their previous shopping history so that you can integrate those data points back into your CRM or keep them in your marketing automation platform so that you can run targeted campaigns. If you're talking about regional promotions, these are fields that your CRM system's already set up to capture, and hopefully your sales team is willingly inputting already because it's going to help them do their jobs better, and they probably have sales KPIs targeted to those campaign areas. So that's an area where you would want your sales team to really be sure that they're inputting that data on a routine, regular basis. If you're talking about date fields, now you're getting into the land of custom fields. If you as the marketer would like to have a custom field in your CRM system so that you can run targeted campaigns, it's up to you to sell that case study to the CRM admin and to the sales team. Help them both understand why that data point is valuable, who will be inputting that data point, and at what time they should be inputting it, particularly because this is not going to be a required field, because not every single contact or lead record may have such a field necessary. So really be sure that you're helping the entire team understand your data roadmap before you start asking for them to input data points. So for the CRM fields and the data that we're going to need today, let's talk a little bit about what you would want to be asking for. First of all, to run the campaigns we're talking about, we'll need the basics. Those are things that are probably already required: name, company, title, phone number, email address, etc. We're going to want marketing lists because there are use cases when marketing lists are the best way for you to align with your sales team. You'll need source campaigns. So this is really important if you're going to take control of the campaigns aspect as a marketer. And it's really important that you know both the campaign ROI as well as where someone came from, and be sure that you're really leveraging that campaign entity to its fullest. You'll need the record owner and the record owner email address. This is very important if you plan to send messages that look like they're coming from the person who owns that record in Dynamics. So be sure that you've got a good alignment with that data too. Contract dates we'll also be using today. Those will be both existing customer as well as competitor contract, which takes us to the competitor entity. Just like with the campaigns entity, the competitor entity is a little used but very important entity within Dynamics that you can really use to run segmented and targeted sales campaigns. Next up, you'll need industry so that you can begin to segment based on what industry someone is in and whether or not the content that you're sending is relevant to their industry. Purchase data, which is, of course, organized in many different ways in Dynamics, whether that's through the products entity or through custom fields. You'll want to be sure that we've got access to those fields today. And then last, we'll look at status data. So this is opportunity status or lead status. And really what you're trying to get to is who is in an inactive state, who's been disqualified, qualified, who is still open, who's been won, who's been lost, and why. Once we get through those things, we can start to build our campaign. So let's build our first campaign. This one is one that lots of B2B marketers are very familiar with. It's the content download campaign. One of the reasons I love this campaign is because it's an awesome way for you to get marketing qualified leads into a nurture state. And so one conversation that I think is really important for you to have before you ever run your first content download campaign is start to talk with your sales team about what gets into Dynamics and when it gets entered. And so what I mean by that is there's a definition between a marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead. Oftentimes, a marketing qualified lead is someone who has expressed initial interest in what it is that you're selling, but they're not quite ready to have a conversation with the sales team just yet. And so it's your job as a marketer to continue to nurture that person until they've reached a pre-identified state in which they're sales ready. You can do that based on contact score. You can do that based on intent. You can do that based on search history. There are lots of different ways to define that, but it's important that you have that conversation with the sales team first so that when you run something like a content white paper download campaign, which is really going to send a lot of marketing qualified leads into the funnel, you are aligned with the sales team as to whether or not those get created as leads in Dynamics or kept in your marketing automation platform until they're better ready for sales conversations. The first step to getting into an awareness campaign like this is to actually think about how you'll promote the content that you've created. So this is high value content, and I would delineate it from your blog posts and thinking about it as this is something that took our team hours of work to create. Therefore, it's fair for us to ask for some kind of compensation for that work. In this case, the compensation that you're asking for is their contact information. Generally speaking, that's first name, last name, email address, title, company, and sometimes phone number. You don't want to get too crazy with it, but you will want to think about promoting it to the right audiences. So here you'll have an example of what that might look like. In this case, we might be using programmatic advertising or display advertising to run this on relevant sites so that we know we're hitting people who are most interested based on some of their firmographic or demographic information. You could do something similar with LinkedIn. If you wanted to promote content to a target audience, you could use those, or you could even upload a list of accounts that you know you want to reach and run targeted ads to the relevant titles at said account. So once you get this ad in front of people, the next step is that they would click through, ideally to a landing page from your marketing automation platform, where they're going to give you the payment for the white paper. Again, in this case, that's their contact information. So they fill in their contact information on your landing page from your marketing automation platform. As you can see here, we've got an example from Influence of the kinds of questions and fields we might ask for. And once they hit submit, this is where you have the opportunity to start to nudge this person in the direction of becoming sales qualified. In other words, this is where your lead nurture begins. Here, we always like to recommend using what's called a response page. On your response page is where you're going to put in just a subtle bit of information about what it is that you sell. In this case, we've got a quick video for someone to take a look at the Influence marketing platform. We know that they're interested in marketing automation software because of the kind of content that they've downloaded. And so now we feel like it's relevant to say, if you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can take a look inside by looking at this short video. There's another important step that's happening here as well. As any marketer would tell you, there have been many situations where content downloads are given with bogus email addresses, and then the in-browser content download delivers to that person anyway. What that means is you haven't actually gathered the appropriate contact information because you've allowed someone to download within a browser. So you don't really know who they are, and they know that you don't know who they are. Now, what we always recommend is using a workflow that actually emails the content as a button link, as you can see in this first example. The reason we recommend that is because it does give you valid information from that person who's downloading. But the trick is that it's important that you take the extra step to let that person know that you're not going to bombard them with sales calls just because they're downloading content. The number one reason that someone won't give you valid information in that content download section is because they're afraid that the sales team's going to call them before they're ready. So be sure that you're establishing trust early and often and letting people know that, hey, we get that you're still doing research and we know and you know you're not sales ready and we're willing to accept that. However, take a look at the top, you'll see that this is tracked to our D365 environment so that if a salesperson wanted to go in and see that a lead of theirs had downloaded some content, they're going to get that information in the CRM record. On the other side of this coin, we always recommend using a platform that can send you a notification as well. And it's important that you have this notification go to both the sales team, the marketing team, and ideally the person who owns the record in Dynamics so that they, again, know if someone who they're working has downloaded content, they can have that relevant conversation about what that person might be interested in learning more about. Next, let's talk about event promotions. This is something that in normal times, we would be having a lot of conversations around how to make an event promotion work for trade show marketing and how that might look with Dynamics and with your marketing automation platform. However, these are unusual times. As you can see here, we're virtual. So what might it look like for us to run a virtual event promotion, leveraging both our Dynamics 365 environment as well as our marketing automation platforms? So to get started, we always like to look at a calendar. So you're planning out your events ahead of a conference or ahead of a virtual trade show. And what you should be doing is really starting to layer in your social media posts with your email strategy. So we always like to say, begin promoting these events a couple weeks in advance. And there are a couple of different parties that you want to promote to. First is you want to have some paid social ads that are targeted to people who might be interested in the conference in the first place. And you're going to let them know if you'll be speaking there, if there's a virtual trade show booth, how will they be able to find you, what might you be offering at the virtual trade show booth, and start to put in some incentives both for people to register for the event and also to come see you if they do register. You should be posting some organic posts as well, letting people who are already in your funnel, who already follow your brand, know what you're participating in, how you're sponsoring, why you're sponsoring, and what they can do to get in touch with you while you're there. On the email side, here's where your Dynamics comes in to shine. Most of the time when you're doing an event, you've probably done it in years past, which means you probably have a marketing list from previous years when you've attended this event. What you'll want to do ahead of time, several weeks ideally, because you want to give people time to register and make their plans, is you'll want to go back in time to your Dynamics campaigns entity or to your marketing lists and see whom you've met at previous years at the same show. In this case, the example I have here is from CRM UG Summit, where potentially in years past, we may have met someone and we want to let them know we'll be at the event in the years to come. So we're going to tell them, hey, we met you a few years ago at this event. We want to have you come back and see us. Or if you're not coming, maybe some members of your team. And what we want to tell you is that we're going to be presenting the following sessions at the following dates and times, and we hope we'll see you there. You can also swing by at our booth. Now, this involves a couple of variables, and it also involves a strategy that we like to call the text-based email. So this is going to power dynamically from whomever owns that record in Dynamics. And what you'll have here is you'll have the layering in of company name so that people realize that it's targeted not just at them, but also at the company in the event that they won't be there, or in the event that they've moved on and someone's having their emails forwarded to them. You'll also have the campaigns entity integrated, because that way you know which year you potentially met them. So you may want to have a variable that says, hey, we met you in 2018 versus 2019, so that they remember exactly what year it was that you first interacted. And then you'll also want to have that variable signature block so that it not only looks like the email itself is coming from the person who owns that record, but also has that contact detail at the bottom there. So it really feels personalized and customized. And the nice thing too is if somebody responds to this email, it's going to go directly into this person's inbox and immediately reestablish that conversation that may have fallen by the wayside in the previous years. Next, you want to start thinking about layering your marketing emails. So these marketing emails are going to go to a similar audience, probably also to people you've met in previous years, or to people who you've identified in your CRM as being a part of the relevant industry or the relevant region for the conference that you're promoting. In this case, you want to let people know what you're going to bring to the conference. If you'll be speaking, for example, you want to run a countdown timer to when your session starts. And you want to make sure that it's easy for people to get your session details onto their calendar. You may think about including an iCal download so that they can quickly add it and know exactly where to find you. And you want to be sure to send a reminder so that while they're at the show, if they forget your session's coming up in the next hour, they'll remember via email, oh, right, I said I wanted to go to the session that this person sent out to me. I think I'd like to attend. So be sure that you're layering in a couple of touch points and not just one. So most people are most responsive to campaigns that include between 3 and 7 emails. And that those emails can be a combination of those text-based emails that we saw before, as well as the marketing emails that we're looking at now. You should also be thinking about what happens after the event. So what happens after the event is just as important as what's happening before and during. So you've got a bulk of leads that you're trying to work through at the back end of a conference. And whether or not that conference happens in person, it's still the same situation where you're trying to sort out how many of these people are marketing qualified leads who aren't really ready to talk to the sales team yet, and how many of them are sales qualified leads that we want to make sure we really get in touch with them immediately so that we can move them in the sales pipeline. This is where Dynamics can also come into play and how your marketing automation platform can help you do that. So on the left here, you see an example of how you might send a generic follow-up that looks, again, like it's coming from a person's inbox at Outlook. And you want to make it really easy for them to do a few things. First, you want to say, hey, we hope, remind them where you met them, in this case, at that event. Second, you want to make sure that you've got a link to your website so that they can go do a little bit of research on their own. Remember that this person is getting bombarded with other emails from other brands just like yours who are also in attendance at the conference, whom they also met. So how are you going to stand out? How are you going to remind them to go look at your link? And that's where it's important for you to include also your points of differentiation in this email. Why are you special? Be sure that you tell them right up front. Next, make it easy for that person to schedule a meeting, even if it's a short one. So I always recommend a Calendly link, but there are lots of different tools where you can basically integrate your calendar immediately into a link so that you don't have to do that awkward back and forth of, hey, when should we meet? Are you free on Monday? Are you free on Tuesday? What day are you free? And then lastly, have some kind of follow-up value add. A lot of people like to put a webinar in here, and I think that that's a really valuable addition. So what you're looking at is, what is the next helpful step that I can present to this person so that they want to continue to engage with me? If instead you just send an email that says, buy something from me now, they're very likely to disengage. If you send them something that's clearly of value and clearly adds to the discussion that they would have already been having with you at the event, now you've got a situation where they're beginning to establish some trust and they want to take another step with you. So if it's a webinar, make sure that that content is complementary to what they would have been learning at the trade show. If it's a white paper, same thing. Just be sure you've got a next logical step for them to take with your brand if they're not ready to have a direct conversation with sales yet. Having stuff like this also lets you build in that contact score and lets you nurture them further in the cycle. I always recommend putting together a second email, just like we did pre-event, that looks like it's coming from marketing. Try to get a picture of your team if you can, if it's a face-to-face event, which I realize isn't going to happen this year, but perhaps next year we'll go back to those. And what you'll do is that'll give them a quick reminder of the actual people that they met. And so it's really easy for them to go, oh, yes, I do remember talking to that person, even if they don't necessarily remember your brand. People respond well to faces. In this one, you want to kind of create a choose your own adventure. So this is a little bit of an unconventional email in that it has a lot of calls to action. Ordinarily, you want a single call to action, but it lets them kind of pick what's the most relevant path for them. So in this email, I like to include, pick some information about what brands or services they might be interested in, give them an option to attend the follow-up event, give them an option to subscribe to your newsletters, and make sure that they've got lots of different ways to engage on their own terms. One thing that you do not want to do is put everyone into your newsletter subscriptions after you meet them at a trade show. The reason why is actually twofold. One is you'll have a better engagement and you'll have a better likelihood of having a good deliverability on your emails overall if you let people opt into your email strategy versus just sending them everything because you want to send it to them. Secondly, it really allows you to kind of create a nurture system of trust. So rather than just pitching stuff at people, you're letting them come to you, which is going to lead to people who are ultimately more engaged and more willing to engage over the long haul. Whereas if you just send something when everyone else is sending something, you're increasing the likelihood of people marking you as a spammer or of complaining or of just suppressing your messages altogether. Let's talk about our next campaign. Once you get people into a nurture state, ultimately, you're going to have ones that just don't convert. They don't convert to the sales team. They're not ready to have that sales conversation. Your sales team reaches out to them and they can't make it work. So what do we do with those leads? This is what we like to call the lead reactivation campaign, and it's awesome for people who are using Dynamics with the marketing automation platform. Here's how it works. So on the Dynamics side, what you want to do is you want to create a marketing list, and it could be any length of time. A lot of times I like to recommend looking at your average deal size or your average sales cycle. So how long is your average contract? In a lot of cases, it's 1 year or 2 year. And you want to think to yourself, if this person didn't respond to me, what's the likelihood that they probably went with another competitor? Probably pretty high. So you can put together a targeted marketing list and say, go show me every lead that's not qualified and that's not disqualified. And let's look at a situation where we could say, we're going to put them into a nurture that checks in 1 year later and says, hey, we talked to you about a year ago about our product X, and we didn't hear back. Would you like to restart the conversation now? So here's the nurture and what that might look like. We'll start with that inbound cold lead nurture, and we'll have a series of emails that get sprinkled out. So if you can see here, we've got an ASAP, we've got 30 days later, we've got 60 days later, and then we've got 180 days later. And so you're really kind of working through an automated check-in. You can do these so that they look like they're coming from Outlook as well, so that it still feels like the salesperson they were in touch with is nurturing them, even though that salesperson isn't having to do any extra work. That's a bonus for sales and marketing teams because the sales team knows that you're taking some work off of their plate, and the marketing team knows that you're getting those leads worked that were a lot of work to get into the funnel in the first place. At the end of this, I want you to take note that we always recommend putting in a targeting group after you put someone through a nurture. And the reason is that once you work someone all the way through this nurture, if they still haven't engaged, now they're in a really good opportunity for you to just continuously display advertising to them. So dropping them into a group where you can then run some Google display ads to them or some Bing display ads to them really helps you make sure that they're consistently seeing your message and consistently seeing your brand, even if they're not ready to buy from you right now. Here's an example of what that email might look like and how you might want to integrate something like your campaigns data into an email. And the reason this is so important is because when this person came to you, they came from a very specific source. They probably know where that source was. If it was an event, if it was something like a software advice site, if you're a software marketer, if it was a specific type of campaign or maybe in from your website. You can use your campaign entity variable, so in this case, that might be your source campaign, to remind them that they actually asked for information from you in the first place. And that's going to create a situation where they are more likely to open your email because they recognize that lead source and they recognize that personalization. Once you get into the email, you've got to remind them why they would have gone with you in the first place. So hammer in on those points of differentiation and really try to set yourself apart from how your competitors might be messaging them. An important step in this journey is to run a competitive analysis with your messaging versus your top competitors. I like to put this in a chart and say, if these are the 5 things my competitors are saying, even if they're things that I also can say, I'm not going to say them. I've got to find other things to say that aren't already being said so that we really stand out when we send a follow-up email like this. Here's an example of what this would look like with those variables populated. In this case, what we do is we've got Capterra. And so when it reads, we'll say, I'm sure you've been looking at several other platforms following your request for information from Capterra. It's all personalized, again, all using CRM data, but it really helps that this person who's receiving this email is going to feel like we know who they are, and it feels less like a cold outreach and more like a follow-up email from a salesperson. And here's another example as well. Next, let's move into date-specific campaigns. So sometimes you might be in a situation where you've got an opportunity that's been created and then that opportunity was lost. Well, you have a date associated to that, and hopefully you also have the competitor entity associated to that. That doesn't always mean that that person's lost forever. Just like when you lose a customer, it doesn't mean that customer's lost forever either. This is where date-specific campaigns can really come in handy. You're capturing the date at which you lost someone or the date at which a certain action happened. You can run automated campaigns in your marketing automation platform that are based on those date fields. So in this case, you might want to create either a marketing list in Dynamics where you're saying, if contract end date is in next 90 days, let's automate a contract renewal reminder. Or if we lost them 365 days ago, let's automate a check-in. You can do something similar in a platform like the influence marketing platform, where if you're populating a date field over, you can do current date plus 30 days, or however long you decide to run that for. Once you get into the system, you want to create essentially a couple of check-ins, and you want to be sure that you're using scrubs. So the first time you send this email, you're doing a contract renewal in, say, 60 days. Hey, remember to renew your contract, get in touch with your account rep. And then on the second one, where you're doing a renewal in 30 days, you want to be sure that you're scrubbing out everyone who's already renewed, so that you don't have a situation where someone who was in that initial group and responded is getting tagged again, even though they've already taken the desired action. Once you get into the personalization here, you want to be sure that you're leveraging your owner record. So who's the owning user in Dynamics, so that it's going to dynamically populate their signature. And you also want to use contract date as a variable as well. As you'll see in blue, we're actually going to put their actual contract date in there so that they know the date that it's going to expire. And with a little bit of math, they can say, oh man, it's really coming up close to that. And it really helps to trigger that interaction. Next, let's talk about customer onboarding campaigns. So now that you've got some customers in the pipeline and you want to make sure that they're having a great experience, customer onboarding campaigns is a great way for you to tie yourself to the sales team so that when the sales team actually closes an opportunity as one, the marketing team is ready to populate an onboarding campaign that ensures that the new customer has a seamless experience as they join the community of new customers. So what does that look like? Well, obviously that starts with the platform onboarding campaign marketing list. You could also use a flow for this, but the ultimate goal is you want to create a scenario when an opportunity is closed as one, it adds the primary contact to a marketing list so that you can populate an automated marketing campaign through your marketing automation platform to that person. You may consider offering different onboarding campaigns for each business line, and it really depends on how different those lines of business are and what that onboarding process looks like. For example, at Influence, we have a totally unique series for our new agency clients than we do for our new marketing automation platform clients, because the scenarios that those clients need and the things that they need to understand as they're becoming a customer are very different. And that's something that you can power through Dynamics. So in our instance, when we use Dynamics, we make sure that each platform opportunity is clearly delineated as a platform opportunity, whereas each agency opportunity is clearly delineated as an agency opportunity. And those are sort functions that we look at in the marketing list as we create those scenarios. So what you'd be looking at next is, what does that campaign look like? I always recommend running the length of the campaign for about the average amount of time it takes for a new client to be fully onboarded. This is something that your client success team can help you set up. And if you ask them to say, how long generally does it take before you would define a full onboarding of a client, that's how long your series should be. So if that's 6 months, you're creating a 6-month long series. If it's 3 months, you're creating a 3-month long series, and so on and so forth. The content that you're including in these campaigns really can be quite long form. As you can see, this is an example of what our influence marketing platform series includes. And so what we're looking at here is, what do you include in the series? Well, you are including the things that they need to know to be successfully set up, to understand what's going to happen next, to understand who to contact if they need help. And then ultimately, as they get more and more comfortable with you, you're starting to get into the land of, let's start to ask for reviews. Let's start to incorporate some of our surveys so that we can make sure our product is exactly as we want it to be, so we can make sure they're happy with our product and with our services. We're going to let them know about other things that are of value to them. For example, they get a free ticket to our conference, or here's where they can subscribe to newsletters, or here's where they would find the help section. So you're ultimately kind of whittling out information over time so that they know what they need to do, but they're also not overwhelmed with too many things to do all at once. So in this case, this series goes out over the course of 120 days. And at the end of it, we say, we are officially onboarded. Here's what happens next. It's time to get certified. If you have a referral, we'd love to hear from them. And here's where you can find additional information in the help section. For the survey, this is great for you to incorporate as part of this onboarding series because it gives a lot of insight both to the sales team, to the customer success team, and to the marketing team. So the marketing team can use survey data like this to really help to understand why it is that someone went with you in the first place. And what that helps you do is really kind of hammer in on your points of differentiation. Are there things that you can cull from a survey like this to help you know how to better market people like this in the future? So it's kind of a way to create a target lookalike audience by looking at some of the data inputted and saying to yourself, is this something that maybe a lot of people might resonate with? And should we incorporate it in our marketing messaging or in how we're doing our targeting? Let's get into upsell and cross-sell campaigns. So I always like to say too, this is really important that these are done after someone is fully onboarded. The worst case scenario that you could have is to immediately hit someone who just bought a product from you with an upsell for a new product to buy something else from you. That's not a great scenario and it doesn't make anyone feel very good. So at what point do you run an upsell and cross-sell campaign? I always like to say the first thing you should do is look at, are they still in the onboarding series? And if so, make sure that they aren't getting your upsell and cross-sell emails. You can incorporate a group at the end of your onboarding series. That's a great way to make sure that until someone reaches that group, they cannot get into a series like this. But you can also use date fields. In this case, we'll say date provided equals email. Close date is older than 6 weeks. And that ensures that we know they've been a client for at least 6 weeks because the opportunity closed 6 weeks ago before we would start to incorporate new messaging. Purchase date is another way to run it here in the influence marketing platform, but really what you should be looking at is, I want to make sure someone's fully onboarded before I try to upsell or cross-sell them. Now, the other nice thing is that Dynamics is perfectly set up for you to capture who and when to get some of this data. So for example, if you want to get predictive with your upsell and cross-sell campaigns, you can go into Dynamics and say, if somebody has bought product X, what's the likelihood that they'll buy another product? And you can run a report that says, how many people have product X and product Y? How many people have product X and product Z, and you can start to run some consistencies. And if you notice, for example, that the vast majority of people who bought product Y also bought product Z, you can proactively recommend product Z once somebody has made it through the onboarding process. Or you can even feed that detail to the sales team so that they know to include it as part of the overall package as they're getting started in the first place. What does this look like? So when you're getting into the upsell and cross-sell, there are a lot of different ways to do this. You can go long form and just let people know about the additional services that you have. LinkedIn has a really great automated reminder to increase your total budget. So if you're looking at a scenario where you want to encourage consumption, make sure that you have emails around encouraging additional consumption. Or it could be one of these leave a review type emails. They're very popular in the B2C realm, but they work just as well in the B2B realm. You can always ask for review data and then say, hey, while you're here leaving us a review on what you've already purchased, here are some other things that are relevant to you that you might like. And then lastly, let's look at win-back campaigns. So this is kind of where we get into the realm of what do you do when you lose an opportunity or when you lose a customer? They're not gone forever, as we mentioned before, and it's possible that they made a choice to go with a competitor and ultimately decided that the competitor didn't service them as well as you did. But you've got to be there at the right place and time to recapture that person because the chances they'll come back to you on their own are kind of 50-50. So what can you do to encourage them to come back? Well, first you can use the competitor's entity in Dynamics to start to capture who you lost them to in the first place. This works for lost opportunities and for lost customers. When you lose someone, when they give you notice that they're going with someone else, be sure that you ask, can I say who are you going with? And be sure that you're using the competitor's entity so that you can flag that on either the account record or on the opportunity record. That gives you great data into who your real competition is, and it also gives you an opportunity to incorporate that as a variable when you do an automated reach out to them. So in this case, you may want to look at, let's talk about inactivity. So if this person hasn't engaged with us and we want to make sure that if they've gone with a competitor, it's time for us to reach out to them again. We may want to set our date range to 12 months. We may want to set our date range to 6 months. I always say, look at your industry and look at the average time that an opportunity is good for, or that the average time that a contract is valid for, and start to base how long you wait on that data. Now, if you tend to have an industry where you have annual contracts, triggering that at 365 days means you're too late. So you may want to instead trigger at 30 days or before the contract renewal, or maybe 300 days total. It all kind of depends on how long your sales cycle is and how long those contracts are. All data that you can pull from Dynamics. Once you build a series, you probably want to have a couple of different emails within it. As I said, I always recommend having at least 3 emails in a series. 2 sometimes is good enough. But make sure you're touching them in enough times so that they really have a chance to engage with you. In this case, you'll have inactive contacts who have not reached out to you for 365 days. You'll send them an email and then a second email. And then what you might want to do is put them into a direct mail campaign. So if you can't get them to engage with you via email or via a landing page, start to think about other channels. In this case, you may create a group at the end so that you know who is ready for the next channel. So here's an example of what that might look like. You can use personalized variables, or you can say we're following up with you again from the source campaign, and we want to know how things are going so far. It's been a while since we visited. And if you populate those with variables, so that you'll see that we've got here the personalized landing page. You can also take a look at their contact information. We have a timeline feature in Influence that's really great that lets you kind of take a look at what actions someone's been taking before your sales team reached out to them. And that'll kind of give the sales team a chance to understand how this person is engaging before they do a follow-up reach out, especially if this person used to be a customer. You want to know what they were engaged with before you do a cold reach out. So once we get through the end of those 7 campaigns, you are set up to be an awesome Microsoft Dynamics and marketing automation marketer. And you've really got 7 campaigns that are going to help you with that sales and marketing alignment. So the ultimate goal here is that you will be closer to your sales team than ever before, and you'll be working in tandem on some of your joint goals. So with that, thank you so much for watching today, and I look forward to hearing from any and all of you if you'd like to continue the conversation about Microsoft Dynamics and marketing automation strategy. You can reach out to us at emarketingplatform.com. You can sign up for our newsletters, which, as I mentioned, are opt-in only, and there's a link right there for you to follow. Or feel free to reach out to me directly via email or Twitter. We are always happy to continue the discussion with you. Thank you for having us.